You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and that charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag
For what?
with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club,
Why?
buy some bottles, impress them girls.
what?
It's more than life.
Oh, fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast and Who Dat. And I'm Ethan, and welcome back. And I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. And I guess I took a week's vacation, but I'm back. And of course, you take a week off, and a lot of news piles up. And I wish some of it was good news. Some of it is, and some of it isn't. And it'd have been really nice if the Saints could have capitalized on some of it, because before they played on Sunday, the NFC South, it 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 added up perfectly. It set up perfectly for them, but they weren't able to capitalize. Just like seems like every other week, the NFC South, it plays up perfectly for them, and one team doesn't lose or they don't win, and they just can't seem to get tied up for first or half a game back, and it's just crazy how it seems like every other week that happens. But let's get into some of these topics that have piled up since I took a week off. And anyways, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll get into this and maybe get into some of my missed hot takes. Even though I don't have video receipts, I don't have picture receipts for them, but we'll go over those and see if you'll give me any credit for those as well. So can I get a menu? And let's just talk about those NFC South, how it broke down before the Saints even played at 3:25. I guess that would be Central Time, 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. And the first game that came to a close was Atlanta. Who was Atlanta playing? They were playing the Commanders at noon, and that game came to an end on a Mariota red zone interception. That got tipped up in the air and got intercepted in the end zone, which caused that game to end at the end of regulation. And that was just a joy, which set that up where it would have gave the Saints, if they won, that they would have been tied. That would have been a tie of five and seven, 5-7, and the Saints would have had the tiebreaker over them if they would have been able to beat the 49ers. And then with Fox's coverage, they went directly to the game of the Buccaneers against the Cleveland Browns. And when they went to that game, it was tied 17-17, and the Buccaneers had the ball, and they were like around midfield, and there was only a couple seconds left, and they were trying to move down the field. They didn't get anything like on the first play. I think maybe they actually did get maybe a couple of yards on the first play, and then they just tried a Hail Mary, and they didn't get it. And then they went to overtime, and the Buccaneers actually got the ball back first, and they just didn't really do anything for it and do anything with it. Cleveland got it back, and they just marched down the field with a couple plays and a big play, a big time throw and catch and run, set up by a good throw by Brissett, and then they ended up just scoring a touchdown, and they won that. And it was just like This is setting up perfectly for the Saints to be just a half game back of the Buccaneers, who they would have been 5-7 because they had their bye. If the Saints could have won, uh, no, they would have been 5-6, and if the Saints could have won, they would have been 5-7, 5-7 with the Falcons. And it was just like that was the last team that I would have expected the Buccaneers to lose to was the Cleveland Browns. I kind of expected. I picked the the Commanders to beat the Falcons because the Commanders are actually pretty good. That I think they're 7-5, I think. So they're actually really good. Taylor Heineke and that Commanders defense, they're actually really good. They've beaten some good teams. I would imagine. Uh, I wouldn't surprise me if every single team in the NFC East makes the playoffs. So it was just setting up so perfectly. Like I said, it seems like every time the Saints are in position to get back in contention to be tied for the NFC South lead or be half a game back or get back to 500, uh, something goes awry. Someone in their division either wins a game that they probably shouldn't have, or the Saints lose a game that they were set up to win. And it's just this is the life you live when you're one of those fringe 500 fringe playoff teams. This was the epitome of the uh, years of the 7 and 9 years from 14 to 16, holding out hope that you just might win enough games to make the playoffs. Those kind of seasons just drive you nuts because you're just hanging on and grasping hope all year. But uh, if you followed that Sunday, you definitely know what the final outcome was. And then on top of going into to this game, they were actually relatively healthy as well. A lot of players were coming back from injuries in this game as well. So uh, Cam Jordan, he was coming back from his orbital bone injury, his eye injury. Mark Ingram was coming back from his knee sprain. Uh, Bradley Roby was coming back off of IR from his ankle injury. Uh, um, Trying to think who else. Trevor Penning was coming back from his toe injury. So there was a lot of guys coming back from injury. Marcus Davenport was coming back from his calf injury. So I mean, besides the obvious guys like Pete Warner, Eric McCoy, and obviously Michael Thomas, pretty much, and Marshawn Lattimore, they were relatively healthy going into this game. I mean, I just named off some blue chip players there, but they were compared to past weeks, they were actually pretty healthy going into this game, and it was exciting. It was exciting to get to see Trevor Penning for the first time all year, and you only got to see him a couple times in this game. In this game, in like some jumbo packages, but in one of those jumbo packages you saw him in, he did help and assist and uh, helping Taysom Hill pick up like about 4 yards, 3-4 yards on a quarterback power off to the left side where he was lined up in a jumbo package. So that was actually pretty exciting. You could really see the movement on the line from having him in there. He's definitely a big guy that can move some bodies in there. So it was interesting. But he didn't get to start over that. That's another player that was back off of injury as well. James Hurst was back from concussion. So they were healthy in this game, but it didn't seem to help a lot because they the 49ers they won the toss. They decided to defer to the second half, and the Saints got the ball first, and it looked like they were moving the ball a little bit. They got a new set of downs off their first 3 plays, and then got kind of close to midfield at their own 40, and Kamara picked up about 1 or 2 yards, and Fred Warner, who's an all-pro linebacker for the 49ers, came in and forced a fumble and just killed all the momentum for the Saints there. Like it really just seemed to like take everything out of the Saints, not necessarily on defense, but just everything that they had, like all of their fire and emotion and scratch and claw type of ability. I think that kind of just happens when your best player is fumbling and turning the ball over because because it looked like they were moving the ball there, getting to the 40-yard line and not going 3 and out and punting on their first drive like they have been all season. And then you have like I said, your best player fumbling like that. And that's something that maybe I haven't really heard mentioned very much about Alvin Kamara, is that he did have it. He was dealing with an illness most of the week leading up into this game. So I don't know if that really coincided with these fumbles that he had, but that directly led to the 49ers getting the ball. They ended up getting the ball at New Orleans 43-yard line, and this was an epitome of a bend but don't break defensive stand by New Orleans, because even with them getting the 49ers getting the ball where they did, they still had to go on a 11-play drive. And even with it being 11-play drive, they still had to settle for a field goal. So you got to give credit where credit's due, that even with getting the ball where they did, they still, New Orleans still put up with them having 11 plays to only come away with a field goal, 3 points. That's really impressive, honestly. And then after that, it was just a punt fest there for a little while. The Saints and the 49ers punted it back and forth about 5 times, and then the 49ers went on a 11-play drive that just ended in downs. And then the Saints ended up punting again. And then finally, the 49ers went on a 9-play drive that ended in a pass, a 5-yard pass to Jennings, and that ended up taking the lead 10-0 on New Orleans, and that ended the half there. New Orleans got the ball back with about 13 seconds and just didn't really do anything with it with 13 seconds. And how conservative this team is, you couldn't really expect them to do anything with that. So, I mean, really, just you got to credit the defense really for how they looked. This game was just really odd. It seemed like with how good their defense was playing, it seemed like at any moment that they could score a field goal or score a touchdown and get right back in it. But I don't know, it just really never happened. And then, of course, the 49ers won the toss and deferred at the beginning of the game, and they got the ball first and went on a 9-play drive and ended up just having once again the Saints defense stood up and only allowed a field goal and took the lead to 13-10, and then the Saints went on their own 12-play drive, and just like it's like almost every game the Saints have, they end up getting stopped before they get like in scoring range, and they end up having to settle for a 46-yard field goal and Will Lutz ends up missing it. And that was something I was just talking about in a previous uh, podcast, is how Will Lutz kind of struggled at the beginning of the year and how he's looked good in the past couple games, and how the special teams has been playing better with Rashid Shaheed and Blake Gilligan. And actually, Blake Gilligan looked pretty good in this game. I think he had maybe two punts that were downed inside the 20-yard line. But once I start um, giving them compliments and talking good about them, of course they miss a field goal like this. And I know at this point in the game, it was in the second half, in the towards the end of the third quarter. But even 3 points in a nothing to 13 game probably would have been big. And they end up just getting the ball back. The 49ers get the ball back, and the Saints actually force a 3-and-out. So that just shows you how great, even with a big momentum shift and missing the field goal, the Saints defense is still playing hard. Gets a big stop, 3-and-out, and then the Saints march down the field on a 12-play drive and fumble at the goal line. Alvin Kamara fumbles at the goal line again. So it's just like a touchdown there would have been huge. I think at that point in the game, there was like, I don't know, there was what, like 6 minutes still left. So, I mean, if they could have got another stop, which they did, after that, they got a stop there. They got another 3-and-out there. I mean, all they had to do was if they would have scored there, it would have been just a 6-point game. Like, this game was at the taking for a game that was a shutout. It was the most winnable shutout that I've ever witnessed. It was a game that was like not a beatdown, like the most beatdownable game that wasn't a beatdown, like the most blowoutable game that wasn't like blowoutable. Like, they got embarrassed, but they didn't get embarrassed. Like, uh, at the same time, like this game was, like I said, there's been other games that were more embarrassing or hard to watch, but out of everything, this game was just disappointing more than anything, because they weren't able to score. They weren't able to capitalize on how the NFC played out, and they were in position to make field goals. They were down in the red zone a couple times and weren't able to score. They had drop passes. They had penalties go against them. They had turnovers. Like, this game was there for the taking, and they just couldn't do it. And it was just disappointing. But yeah, let's talk a little about a bit about the refs and some plays that kind of went against them. So the seems like we haven't really talked about the refs in a couple games now, but there were some interesting calls in this game, penalties and things that didn't happen, like the 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 no call, or the, I guess it was a bad call on the interception by Alontae Taylor, which would have been his first interception of his career, and that ended up getting like brought back like all the way to like around the 25-yard line or so. I guess that was due to like legal contact. That was one play, and then on another drive where they were driving pretty deep, the Saints were driving. There was another play where I guess it was Chris Olave caught a pass and took like two steps and went to the ground, and like his elbow was down, and then the ball came out. And like when they were reviewing it, it seemed as if they were reviewing to see if it was a fumble. And then when they came back with the decision, they said it was an incomplete pass. Like that was such a weird play, like the way it played out. And like I felt that they would have like completed that. That would have been a completed pass. Like I felt like they were really rolling and had a lot of momentum there. Like it felt like they were going to score on that play. Like that was very odd how that played out. Like that was just a complete momentum killer. That call and that play. But got to give it on Shanahan there for challenging that play. Got to give him credit for that. And then also the downs play, the end of basically the end of the game, where Joey Bosa was offsides. I thought that was closer than it was. I thought that was pretty close. Maybe I'm in the minority there. I thought it was pretty close to call. I don't think it was really egregious of how offsides he was, but still, I guess he was offsides. But I don't think it really would have mattered that much because there was just 3 minutes and 17 seconds left. So I mean, they'd have had just even if they'd have called it, they'd have still had to guaranteed they'd had to score a touchdown even. So I don't think even if they had called the offsides, it wouldn't have given them a first down anyways. So that was probably out of all of them, that was the least worst one. And then the drops, the two drops by, I guess, I think it was the first one came from Juwan Johnson, and then the second one came from Taysom Hill. Like both of those were off their face mask, like in the end zone. Like those were like terrible. And we've just been talking up how good Juwan Johnson has been here lately. Like those both would have been big plays that just ended up being downs, ended up leading to no points because of them. There's just multiple plays, big plays like that could have been game changers that like I said, nothing in this game went the Saints' way. But let's see, I guess let's get into some stats here. There's nothing too positive, but see what we got here. Because Andy Dalton's stats really weren't terrible. Because you add in the drops and the penalty that took away the big play to Chris Olave, and they could have been a lot better because he could have had a touchdown, maybe could have had two if it would have been if some of those could have went the other way. So he was 18 for 29 for 204 yards, 7-yard average, no touchdowns, no interceptions, only sacked once for 7 yards at 52.3 QBR and 83.1 rating. Like that's not horrible. If you added a couple more completions, maybe a touchdown in there, I mean, those stats could be a lot better. Like, that's pretty average. That's pretty much Andy Dalton-ish. That's pretty game manager-ish for him. I mean, he didn't get sacked. He didn't get sacked a bunch of times. He didn't throw an interception. I mean, really, the only thing that's missing off of there for them to have won is a touchdown, and that's really the big thing that's missing off of there. And then Taysom Hill had his classic pass attempt. He threw a pass but didn't complete it. So nothing to really show there. And this is probably a big reason why they didn't win here is because Andy Dalton was their leading rusher. He had 4 carries for 21 yards for 5.3 yard average, 0 touchdowns, a long of 10. Taysom had 6 carries for 13 yards, 2.2 average, no touchdowns, a long of 6. And then Alvin Kamara had 7 carries, 13 yards, 1.9 average, 0 touchdowns, 6 long. And then Mark Ingram had 4 carries, 10 yards, 2.5 average, 0 touchdowns, and a long of 5. With only the 7 carries by Alvin Kamara, and obviously there being 2 fumbles there, I wonder if they were a little reluctant to rush him after him having those 2 fumbles. I know without a question, if Sean Payton was still the coach, that he would be in the doghouse after fumbling twice. Probably after just fumbling the one time, and then the history of some of his other fumbles going back to the Carolina game, he would already be in the doghouse for fumbling and literally costing them games. Like, he cost them this game. Like, I know there's a lot of love and a lot of leeway to let Alvin Kamara get away with this kind of stuff, but to some point, I feel like they probably limited his carries after that. It seemed like they were afraid to give him carries after that, so they just totaled 63 yards on the entire day. And then Chris Olave having pretty much your Chris Olave-ish day. Five receptions for 62 yards, 12.4 yard average, no touchdowns, 20 along of 29 targets. So probably in there. Should have been another pretty long pickup, but got taken away due to a review that got overturned. Rashid Shaheed had 2 catches, 53 yards, a 26.5 average, no touchdowns. That one long on that drive for 35 yards, 3 targets. Alvin Kamara had 6 catches for 6 catches for 37 yards, 6.2 yards, 0 touchdowns, a long of 10 on 7 targets. Jarvis Landry had 2 catches for 20 yards, 10-point average, 12 long on 4 targets, and Adam Troutman had 1 catch for 17 yards, a long of 17 on 1 target. And then Caden Ellis had 12 total tackles. He was just all over the place in that game. And with how good the defense is, that's really impressive. He was definitely the main man. He had 12 total tackles, and 12 of them were solo. So he was not coming up late and cleaning stuff up. He was the first guy there. And let's see, Shy Tuttle, I think he had 5 tackles, 4 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Paulson Adebo was very good. I think you could argue this was maybe his best game. He was locked down in coverage. He had 6 total tackles, 2 solo, 2 pass deflections. No one else had a sack. I don't think anyone else had a sack. But yeah, it's hard to really highlight anyone as like a real standout on defense when no one forces turnovers. There's no interceptions. There's no forced fumbles. There's no fumble recoveries. There weren't a lot of sacks on today. There's no defensive touchdowns. This team just doesn't really do anything like that. The kick return, the returning game was good, was exciting. But Rashid Shaheed had 2 returns, 47 yards, a 23.5 average, 1 long one for 26 yards. Wayne Washington had 1 return for 13 yards, 13 average. And He had 2 punt returns for 18 yards, a 9 average, 1 long for 11. And then Will Lutz just had the 1 missed field goal, which was a 46-yarder. And then Blake Gillikin had another strong game, four attempts for 183 yards, an average of 45.8, 1 touchback, and 2 inside the 20-yard line, a long of 57. So, hell, you could maybe argue Blake Gillikin had the best game of anyone in this. Out of all the Saints players, Blake Gillikin maybe had the strongest performance. And then would be hot takes, which I don't have receipts for it because I didn't do a podcast last week due to Thanksgiving, due to leftovers and all that I was enjoying and celebrating that. But the main would-be hot take that I was going to predict for this game is after the Saints gave up like 148 yards rushing in the game that they actually won last week, I was going to predict that they were actually going to allow 200 yards rushing to the 49ers. And they actually didn't. They were actually really good on all facets and all formats of the game in this game. But I was surprised by that because even against a bad Los Angeles Rams team last week, they allowed 149, 148 yards rushing. But they did a good job containing Elijah Mitchell, Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason. Like they did a good job. Even Deebo Samuels on the couple end arounds that he had like 2 of those for 0 yards. I guess he had a long of 3, but they must have got him for 3-yard loss as well. But in totality, all of that, they only had 29 carries for 96 yards, a 3.3 average, 0 touchdowns, and a long of 12. So if I would have put that hot take down that they were going to rush for 200 yards against the Saints, I would have been way wrong about that. And then for my score, if I was to have picked one, I don't know if I'd have had a score. Maybe if I was going to put a score out there, I was going to pick the 49ers to win, obviously. I was going to predict them to rush for 200 yards rushing, even though the Rams had 148 yards rushing last week and they still lost. But the 49ers are obviously better than the Rams. But I was going to pick the 49ers to win, but I didn't have a score really predicted. But because the 49ers have arguably the best defense in the league, but I was still going to predict that the Saints were going to score some points in this game. So I was going to probably predict that the score of like 17, maybe they were going to get some points, but they were still going to be in that lower range, probably under 3 touchdowns. But I was going to probably predict that the 49ers were going to score more than 13. I thought they were going to score a lot of points with all the weapons they have: George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, even Jimmy Garoppolo. After he had 4 touchdowns last week that they scored the week before. They scored like 40 points. So if I was gonna have put a score down, I would have picked probably the 49ers to score like 40 points, not 40 points, but 31, probably like 31-17. But that didn't happen. But they still won. They still won 13-0. But it was like the softest landing for a shutout, and it was the first shutout in 20 years since 2002, like December 2002 or something like that. Sometime in December 2002, and the Saints' last 4 shutouts have all been since like 1992, have all been against the San Francisco 49ers. That's just a crazy stat. But I guess that goes all the way back since what, Joe Montana and Steve Young. So I guess that makes it not quite as surprising, seeing how that was like a Hall of Fame, Super Bowl dynasty team, and the Saints weren't quite as good back then. But I guess that's all I have for you. And with that, can I get a who dat? And can I get a menu?